Hello and a very warm welcome to Spuzziness, the sport business podcast on the media platform Sport1. My name is Kim Scholze and I regularly have the honor of talking to special personalities from the sports and outdoor industry. We look at the market, at relevant content through the eyes of industry experts. I'm really looking forward to my conversation today with David Ekelund. Hello, dear David.
Hi, Kim. Very nice to be here.
I'm looking so forward to our conversation. So you are the CEO of Icebug and the president of the Scandinavian Outdoor Group. Dear David, the people... Oh, sorry. Yes?
No, I was just going to say that's correct.
That's correct. The people we invite to my podcast stand out because they have a special radiance for the industry. They are either very innovative or different thinkers, particularly motivating or impressive by the view of things. You are, additionally, a real activist in our sector. So, David, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, so that's pretty much me. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Icebug. So that's been some years in the making now already. And I gladly accept the challenge of trying to share some thinking at least and see if it's innovative and bring it us forward. And the environmentalist or the activist part, it was never really my ambition or my desire to take on a hat like that, but I felt that this has been kind of more of an moral obligation.
It was a brief introduction on your motivation, and to make sure that people who hopefully listen to us from different sectors, from different angles of the sporting and outdoor industry who may not know you, what I doubt, but maybe you can share a little of your personality that we all can listen to the next 45 minutes a little in a different mood. Who are you? Maybe you can share a little of your passions. What makes you tick? Who's David?
I think like so many in our industry, I really like being outdoors. So my main passion there has always been skiing. So bearing that in mind, I live in a strange place in the west coast of Sweden, where it's pretty far to go to the mountains. But here, what I enjoy very close by is the forest, which we kind of always took for granted, but it's been there since I grew up when we played in it, and we still play it in it regularly, going for our runs and our mountain bike rides, and I also enjoy kayaking in the seaside. So there is some outdoor stuff here as well. So that's a lot what I enjoy to do, and my biggest obligation, I would say, is that I'm a father of 3.
And when we met first, I guess you just finished your yoga. What was that? You are a yoga teacher as well?
Yes, well, I did the teacher's training, but unless you really teach people, I don't think you can assume the title of a teacher. But I have the formal training. That was some years ago now. But yoga remains an important part of my life, because I know that regardless how I feel and how stressed I am, I can always turn to yoga practice to ground myself and feel better and come out in a much better place on the other side of it. So yoga, yes, yoga also remains a big part of my life and how I stay mentally pretty sane.
Maybe that's one part of your, say, mindset and attitude, what always comes across as soon as we are starting to talk to each other. So I would love to ask you for the first question, which is more on your business life regarding Icebug, and maybe you can bring our listeners up to the journey. Where did it start and where is it today, and what is Icebug? What's your personal view on things?
So Icebug is a Swedish footwear brand. I started it about 20 years ago together with my mother, who had been a footwear and sportswear designer for a long time. I came into to this part of the business kind of on a banana peel, slipping in on a banana peel. As I had what I've studied at university was first philosophy, but after a while I got a little bit, fed up with asking myself if the world really existed or not. And then I turned to accepting that the world existed, trying to making it maybe a little bit a better place. So I turned to journalism. But even back then, when I was finished as a journalist in the 90s, that job market wasn't really great. And I didn't see a big future in it. So when my mother asked me to start a company together with her and her best supplier from the Far East, I figured that, I can do that for a few years, because she's always been great at design, but not the most business-minded person. I thought I'd bring some business savvy to the mix, and we'd both get rich in a short time. And after that, I could just retire and write novels without having to worry about anybody reading them. So this was my scenario back then. And we did really well in the beginning, because we did design and production for other brands and factories and other big chains for their in-house labels. But even as soon as after a few years, there was this time when we saw that Chinese footwear factories were getting much better very fast at going direct. And also our customers just kept pressing prices. So we figured if we would be able to do something that we would be proud of, then we had to start our own brand. And my mother's specialty had always been in winter footwear. So we decided to start a winter footwear brand. And then we found this technology that was already developed around dynamic studs, which made it possible to run or walk on basically anything from dry asphalt to pure ice. So we decided to put that in the center of this new brand, solving the biggest problem of winter, which is not really keeping your feet warm or dry, but actually making sure you don't slip. And starting your own brand, well, maybe not for everybody, but at least in our case, this was a story of starting to dig a hole for a long, long time. And then after you dig a hole for a long time, you can start filling it a little bit. And that takes an additional couple of years. And then after many years of work by first digging the hole and then filling it, you start making something which actually shows above the surface. And that's what I would say is where we have been the past 7-8 years.
It's hard to focus on the right questions now, because everything is so interesting. What I know, what you can share. Maybe I try to deliver to our listeners the bigger picture of you and Icebug, because the personal story and the Icebug story are like really outstanding for the outdoor industry. Maybe you can start introducing your journey before we end in the future. Maybe you can help us with some milestones over the last years, which were like really the most important points where you saw, okay, that was already successful, there we need to improve, and this is where we need to go. I know that there are some, but it would be great if you'd guide us through what were the most important ones for you. Maybe also that ones that didn't work out, but maybe you can share that journey and the milestones.
Yeah, what kind of stands out for me is, one, we got off to a flying start, because at the very first, we went, often you start by creating your home market, but we went for, since footwear requires very big minimum quantities, we tried to go for a worldwide launch pretty much from the start. And what better place to do that than at ISPO in Munich, the world's biggest trade show. So we were a bunch of happy campers going there in 2001, and then we So when we were building our booth, we built it by ourselves, and we had some kind of Lego system. So it took us 2-3 days to build it back then. When we were standing there sweating, building our booth, somebody, I think it was Martin Köstler, who is the still the back then he was the initiative person for the Scandinavian village, and also an old friend of mine, and the export manager for Hagloves. Nowadays, he's the main ISPO's main guy in Scandinavia. So he came and said, "You won this outer award," and I thought he was joking because I didn't remember we sent any application. But then some more people came around to congratulate us. So apparently we had one. So that was kind of a flying start for us at the very first show we showed. We won this very first outer award. And maybe that lulled us into believing that things would be a little bit too easy, that we would just ride this success, because then there was a couple of really tough years, always trying to fight to reach minimum quantities, which are big and a big obstacle for entering the market for footwear. And I think what kept us going during that time, because nobody really believed in this technology with dynamic studs for slippery surfaces. The main way of writing it off was saying that this is only for old people. But very fast after we came out, we got really strong feedback from end users saying that, some variation of this has really changed my life, giving me a new freedom. I can run where I couldn't run before, so I can still go out running in the wintertime, or even to those older people saying that now I dare to go out in the wintertime again. So I think when we were really fighting, that's what kept us going. So this was a big thing, and then it has been about survive from year to year, especially when you have this cycle of you produce stuff, you pay the factories, and then there's a couple of months where you need to fill the liquidity gap and just survive money-wise. And then I think we kind of kept grinding at it, growing a little bit. Some years not growing, some years managing to do well. And then I think a big thing for me was around 2010. This was the first time I heard about the Earth Overshoot Day, which is the day when the resources that the planet can regenerate are spent, and after that we keep accumulating ecological depth for future generations to take care of. And it just struck me very hard as being irrational, as being unsustainable in the most basic meaning of the word. As it struck me as being plain wrong. So I figured, okay, this is something we have really, us also, something we have to do something about. Because back then in 2010, the Earth Overshoot Day was in August, and 2019, the latest pre-pandemic year, had moved back to July. So we still need everybody to correct course, and we can't remain with business as usual, because business as usual is a disaster. And then it took us from that point. It took us another few years before we had the quantities to be a supplier which could start asking our factories to do something else than just standards. So the real organized work with sustainability started in 2015. And back then, I think there was nobody asking this for us, or I know there was nobody asking this for us. And the first year or so, I think we just spent asking our suppliers the same questions over and over again. And until I realized that, okay, there's no point postponing or just pushing this ahead. We have to start acting on this. And then we started, because we always searched for maximum impact. So we started by the materials we use the most, and started substituting standard materials for more sustainable options, like recycled polyester instead of virgin oil polyester, solution dye instead of conventional dyeing, and so on. And it took us 3-4 years to work through all of the main materials of the line. And then we did it all the main materials for all of the styles, because we don't really work with special projects. This was a big addition.
I don't want to interrupt. Just continue. If you have the feeling I'm asking too less questions, this is not the case. It's the journey which makes it so important. So please continue. It's all fine.
No, I think it's on that journey that we did a couple of different things. Like in the end of the summer of 2018, which here in Sweden was a summer when all of a sudden in Gothenburg it always rains more or less. But that summer we had 100 days without any rain. We had it was like a record drought, and even in Sweden we got all of these forest fires. So it just struck me that this, what I have always taken for granted, the forest and being able to be there and to connect to the forest. That was actually not something to take for granted anymore. So I went to Tom, who is the other owner, working partner at Icebug here in Sweden, and said that, okay, the sustainability work we do it's good, but it's so much data, it takes so much time. There's got to be something we can do a little faster, kind of finding a hack. So I said. And we had seen a fast food chain here in Sweden that they were kind of advertising that they had gone climate positive by calculating how much emissions they cause and then offsetting that with a surplus. So I said, if a fast food chain can do this, then we who live for and by nature and the outdoors, then we got to be able to do it as well. So let's commit to be climate positive by 2020. And, Tom, he said yes, pretty much immediately. And then we embarked on a very interesting journey, because normally it's my view that those that really work with sustainability topics in companies are normally a sustainability manager, and then you have a few designers and product people that are really interested. But this pledging that in 2 years we would become climate positive and not really knowing what that meant, that engaged everybody in the company. So people, they got both proud but also nervous. So this, I think, fostered that much more people. Our CFO got very engaged, both in the measuring, but also in how, because eventually after we have measured, reduced, there will be emissions left, because we produce products and that consumes resources. So he also got very involved in that, and together we moved much faster than we had expected, and actually managed to do it in less than 1 year.
It's such a huge journey. You put it up, and it's you mentioned so many concrete things already, which I followed in the role of a trade show, but also, of course, because I really have high respect of how you transform quite fast. When we first spoke about CO2 emissions and how to become like neutral or already positive, that was one part, and you already outlined the story, and maybe we will share in the show notes of the podcast where your information on the various websites were, because it was transparently mirrored, and one thing was transparency, and the second thing, for, as you always mentioned, were get work done. So you chose to work on the Fridays for good as a climate work Friday, is that correct?
Yeah, I've been testing that now during this first quarter to kind of dedicate, because it's difficult to move many things at the same time as trying to be a CEO, especially during this pandemic year when there was a huge digital fast forward happening to the business, and we kind of transformed from being a wholesale, but almost only wholesale driven business to actually being quite driven from a direct to consumer part as well, which has been tremendously interesting. But you get it's been a way of trying to keep myself, hold myself accountable, because the kind of integrated climate work we do, let's say to lowering our own emissions, that we find the time to do anyways. That's not a problem. So what I try to use the Fridays for is the kind of influencing or outreaching part, because our own impact will remain very small. But if we can inspire, influence, or increase change pressure on the footwear industry, larger players, that would be a huge thing. Or even if we can take some of our learnings and team up with others and influence regulators, that would be an even bigger thing. What I kind of dream of pushing towards is having a global carbon tax in place, or at least a proper. It doesn't have to be a tax; it could be a fee and dividend as well. But having a proper price placed on carbon, because I think that business can be very, very competent in driving this transformation that we need. But this would be harnessed much faster if there is a real cost put on carbon. And this could kind of be a playing field that the regulators, that the politicians set, that they say, okay, please go ahead, do great business, but don't do it at the expense of the planet. So let's say put the carbon tax on 100 euros per ton.
It's one thing is what were brought into your last answers were one thing, how to engage personally with the stories and with the need to really let action follow on words. So I just wanted to highlight that these Fridays you put into that action is already, you share it via LinkedIn, and it's already, if I see it right today, as a Friday where we have our podcast recorded, it's number 15 already. So what you do in terms of that climate work really is on a CEO level to make sure that all bits and pieces are implemented, and you share all your knowledge. And maybe to sum up for that, what you just said in terms of the climate tax globally, is there can you build a framework on what would you like to see coming in the next months or years as concrete actions, when you now hopefully that a lot of people are listening to us and that we could find collaborative ways to join forces. But now if you can put out the word, and we often had that conversation, put it on a carta, say what you really wish for our industry and cross-industry approaches, and one is the carbon tax. And can you bring the picture a little closer to the ones listening? How can they engage and how can they start?
Yeah, I wish I had a perfect answer for that, because that's what I kind of been trying to find a really, really good way forward for that during those Climate Fridays. But one thing we will do now, where I think it would be a great platform for collaboration and to let the European outdoor industry have a stronger voice in this, because I think that we could be much stronger, is we will join the Protect Our Winters platform, which is that has two parts. One very big part is kind of changing the culture, the mindset of people in the winter sports, and then also do advocacy. So to try to influence the regulators and decision makers. So I think that will be a great platform that we could use together as an European outdoor brands or European outdoor, those that are interested in outdoor and winter sports, and try to make stuff that builds up to regularly what are decisions at the European Union level, but also leading up to the big climate conference this fall, the COP 26. So there, I'm really, please reach out to me if you want to be part of like forming an outdoor CEO alliance or outdoor sports industry alliance. I'm all for cooperation and introducing some friction where business as usual is too smooth. If it's business as usual, that actually is not good for us.
A short break. Here comes an independent commercial. Commercial done, back to our conversation. Thank you, David. I guess this is our both common approach to really put the right persons to the tables that have the attitude and mindset to share and to collaborate, not in any political order, but just to make sure that things are moving forward. And when we had our pre-conversation, I guess there's a lot happening in the last year. If it comes to changes, whether in the market and also in terms of, let's call it management attitudes or mindsets. So maybe we put that question up front and first. How did you manage your mindset with your company in the times of change and also in terms of empowerment of employees and motivation? There's a lot to tell from your personality and from your company.
I think it has been, at least for me, it has been a kind of humbling year. Of course, right now I should say that it's pretty easy for me to say, because we, in many ways, at the end we had a really good year, but we didn't know that if we go back 1 year. Then we had no idea if we go back to April or May last year. And this concept of actually not knowing and embracing that and giving up, because it's moving into some sort of vulnerability, giving up knowing, and this kind of CEO Superman role, which is easy to try to go into, and having the mindset that you have the best and smartest solutions and ideas for going forward, but actually embracing not knowing and giving up trying to constantly give directions. But instead, this year I moved a lot more into building relations, understanding the importance of relations, because eventually at the end of the day, a company is just made up by a lot of people who have relations and who have ideas and who have feelings and who move things forward or doesn't move things forward, and develop or don't develop, and take decisions if you wanna do business on the expense of the planet and of people who work in the supply chain or not. So instead of having all the answers, embracing trusting people, trying to listen to them, and giving people in the organization even more responsibility and trust, embracing that they can change and can solve problems. And this has led to a massive payoff in the company. With, there was a period when me and Tom felt that we left space for people and nothing happened, and that was very frustrating. Mm-hmm. And then I think what the bravest thing we did this last year was that we kept this space open, and then people started to move in. And once that happened, it's been a spin on the effect of the development. So I would say that we developed and learned more this year than we did any other previous year, and it's not even close. So we kind of embraced using this intensity of the situation of not knowing, and use this intensity and seeing what we work with in ourselves, as in ourselves individually, but also what we work in ourselves as in the organization, to improve, to collaborate better, to move forward better, to learn things, new things we need to know. And this is where I really, really landed also earlier this year when I've been thinking about it. I think that there's a very strong correlation between, if we want to move in the big world, if we want to move towards a sustainable way of being, where we can sustain our activities, we also need the personal or inner development of becoming more mature, being able to add additional perspectives. So these are two different journeys that are very closely linked and need to be closely linked moving forward. So this is one thing that we deliberately do now at Icebug, that we deliberately want it to be a developmental organization for the people in the organization, so that they become more mature, can handle more complexity, can take much more decisions at all different levels than we had before.
So
does it make sense?
Yes, it makes total sense, and I'm so quiet because I'll just leave the way how you. I knew you will explain it like this because it directly links to new work, and to all that is important if it comes to influences from other, let's call it ages and generations, and how to move forward with maybe new business models, new business thinking, and different attitudes. And maybe if we have right now the possibility to get a little more into your head on a view of the market. Let's do, like, if we have the bigger picture in the last question, then now we maybe move to the outdoor market or to the overlapping market in the footwear industry. What do you see in terms of changes of the market, new markets, and changes in consumer behavior? What's coming? What's next?
Well, it will be very interesting to see for the outdoor industry how well because obviously there has been, and I think except for when places have been in lockdown, it has been the same trend all over, that people have kind of flocked to the outdoors, and there's a lot of new people. There's an increased participation in outdoor activities from people who are already there, and there are new people coming. So let's see how good a job we can do of making this stick and make people that are newcomers feel welcome. I hope we can do a good job of it, and that we will see a real transformation from people, skipping, going to the shopping mall in the weekend and going outdoors instead. So, of course, increased outdoor participation is a big trend that I don't know how much it will, regress to some kind of normality, or how much this is a new normal that we're stepping into. One thing we really see strongly is that there is that sustainability, I would say for the first time, is something which seems to drive buying decisions, which generally, I'm a little bit careful here, but generally this should be a good, very good for the world, because it means that those that have more sustainable practices, they get chosen over others that don't, and that will drive change. But of course, it's important that it doesn't become just more shopping of more sustainable products, but that there is foundation also of buying products you really need before you buy the most sustainable version of that product. And on the other side, there's also the question of, you see across the board now, you see a lot of brand messaging about sustainability. So it will be interesting to see how fast the learning curve can be about which of those claims are really carry materiality. Let's say, what of the sustainability claims really make a difference, and what is not so important. So those are two big trends that I see. and I think that we will see. I don't see what a lot of people talked about, but I don't see that we have a real push towards lower prices or a kind of crisis that people search for lower cost options. I don't see that at this point, at least, because we didn't really hit into big recessions with all of the support programs.
Mm-hmm. I'm a guest in my own show. It feels really, really good, and it's so interesting to follow your like movement in the mind. And one thing I really want to ask is if you see where Scandinavia is in terms of all the market and the influences you're saying, and you also start to be strong in very, very other countries, but seeing maybe it also out of the view of you being the president of the Scandinavian Outdoor Group, it's always named as a business where people do it a little more towards the right attitude and the section of sustainability, and a lot of retailers are often named that they start to have maxims to do business right in terms of supply chain management from brands they buy, etc. Is there something like an overarching something between the consumers and the retailers and the changes from online to offline? What would you want to share? What do you see there coming in the next 3 to 6 months after it? So if you mention red prices and consuming goods, etc., do you already have a clear picture?
I didn't quite get the question.
How do you see the next 3 to 6 months if it comes to like concrete consumer behavior, which is influenced by brands and retailers? Maxims from retailer to just buy sustainable brands, for example, and to also educate consumers, etc. How far is this movement? Because Scandinavia is always mentioned to be the front runner globally.
Yeah, we can see that. At one end we have REI that are really quite advanced in this in the US, the world's biggest outdoor retailer. They really have a very ambitious program for moving sustainability and inclusivity to the forefront. So we're following that, and that's very interesting and rewarding. And we also see that in Scandinavia we have also, not only because they are an outdoor chain, so it would be maybe more expected from them, but in Scandinavia we also see from those of our customers that are the biggest sport chains here, or some of the biggest, that they have a very big interest in lifting up sustainability products. And for example, we introduced this follow the footprints concept now, where you can scan a QR code and you see the key sustainability indicators, including carbon footprint, percentage weight based of recycled material and of bio-based materials. So they will do pretty big things with this come this fall, when we do the official launch of it and have it on all the products, the QR code. So it's a big shift towards more sustainability across retail, I would say. That's something as seen as an important part. And then I think that there is also, at least from what I see at Icebug, there is a real possibility for symbiosis between brands' own retail and especially the physical retailers. If you don't have a lot of retail shops yourself, what you do online will drive traffic, not only to your own web shop, but also a lot more traffic to physical retailers that carry your products. So I think that there is a new kind of symbiosis that brands and retailers can act in, where the brands, even small brands like us or smaller brands, can take a pretty big responsibility in driving brand awareness or desire or demand.
Yeah,
I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, you answered the question because the only thing we want to do with our podcast here is to really spread the word and inspire, and it's hopefully for all the listeners a way to start changing immediately. And as you mentioned, we need common platforms and change approaches, and this can only be in our session here like a fundamental inspiration, but holistic to start changing people's attitude. So if you do not mind, I would leave.
But then what will influence the sales the most is fall winter will of course as always be the weather.
Good thing that you mentioned that one. I love talking to you so much because your humor is so like overarching. If I may ask you now for our little questionnaire, which is some questions, some short answers from your side. It is all under the rooftop. How could this happen to me? It is the last few questions of our podcast. And if you are ready, I would like to start. Are you ready, David?
Fire away.
Your most awkward business moment?
I don't know if it occurred yet. I don't. I might come back to that one.
Your biggest surprise?
My biggest surprise in business?
As you like, business, private, whatever.
Well, I would have to say how I think maybe 5 of the biggest surprises was different things which happened because of COVID. That has completely changed everything.
Samir, your most outstanding idea?
That's a really tough. I'm not doing very well at those questions. My most outstanding idea. I don't feel too sure I had one, but it was pretty brave. It's very few ideas that I get that are my own. It's you process ideas you get from other places, build on things that other people done, and do them in your own context. So it's not very original idea, but deciding that we would.
I could already answer it for you because apart from Icebug, the Friday for having it work into the climate idea changing, and you said so many things on Icebug with the CO2 emissions, how you changed it and how you presented it to various working groups, and you also did like a wake-up speech on last ISPO. So there are so many outstanding ideas which make it so special to listen to you. So I love how humble you are, but you could maybe we'll come back to that as well later if you have one more. Otherwise, please tell me your craziest trip. It could also be a personal whatever.
My craziest trip. Once I was on the cruise ship from Stockholm to Helsinki. That's a pretty crazy trip. We did it early when we had to save a little money. We didn't fly, but instead we take this cruise ship.
Your best deal?
My best deal... I guess it would have to be buying into starting the company I started now. That's the best deal.
Your contribution to make the world a little better?
Yes. I'm quite... Well, I would say our contribution is sharing what we learn.
Your most inspiring moment? What inspired you in a special way or in a sustainable way in the last years?
I think that it's maybe not a moment, but it's a process of moments. But somewhere along that you realized that this little girl who was sitting outside of the parliament in Sweden protesting climate, and she was sitting there alone, and it looked so sad. And then a few months later, it turned into this global movement. So the inspiration of that in really punching above your weight and taking more responsibility than what is your fair share, I think that's extremely inspiring for me.
Your most reliable source or guidance, where it comes from?
I think that I have a few different sources. So I think the most important kind of source or method for guidance is trying to apply kind of scientific approach to ideas and being able to rethink them. So testing really and see if it's valid or not. And I think that also goes for things that are not, in a certain sense, not scientific, like yoga practice. A lot of it is not research based in that you can duplicate it with actually experiments, but I see through my own experience and using my own body and doing certain things that it's valid.
Can you recommend a book, a podcast, or a film? What inspired you lately?
Oh yeah, that's a lot of stuff. I think my biggest source of inspiration lately has been Brené Brown with the concepts on vulnerability. And then that kind of goes into a lot of other stuff also. But Brené Brown on vulnerability, she has a podcast on Spotify that I don't remember what it's called now.
Yeah,
but
I'll
it's
share
also
it
a
in the
TED
show
Talk.
notes. So it's always good to share information. Any more?
Yes, I also been. I've kind of been reconnecting to that, but the work of Jim Collins, who's been studying what makes startups work, what makes companies turn from good to great, and what builds lasting excellent, and we kind of put this together as a map for what makes good companies tick. I think that's very profound work, actually. It's been quite helpful to us, and I would recommend that to anybody trying to, which I think a lot of people listening to this podcast would be, trying to make a business work.
I'm curious myself. I'm not sure if I checked that already. And how can people get in touch with you, David?
He's got Jim Collins, I think.
With you, because I will share info. Yeah, with you.
Yeah, what is the best way to get in touch with me? I'm very sparse with because there's so many people contacting me via LinkedIn. But it's a good. I mostly browse those, but I don't reply when it's a lot of selling stuff. But if somebody connect with me on LinkedIn and want to collaborate around something which drives sustainability or the climate issue forward, that's a really good place to start.
Thank you very much, David. I think we will have numerous chances to continue our conversation, and I'm looking really, really forward to it. So if there's a last thing, a claim, or a call to action you want to share with our listeners, this is the moment for it now.
Yeah, I would just like to say that we can't just be minding our own business, because business as usual is a disaster. But together, I do think that we can change because this is something that the last year has showed us, that change can be both deep and fast, and even though it's been dark in many ways, in some ways it can also be very beneficial. So let's together act on climate issues, the climate emergency, because before it turns into an even bigger global crisis than the one we are still in.
Thanks so much, David. I really enjoyed listening. It was more a listening session than an asking session, and I really, really enjoy your way of seeing things. Thanks you so much, and thanks for our listeners. If you liked what you hear, and if you want to hear more, recommend and share and like in the various podcast channels, but also get in contact with us to make sure that relevant content is seen out of your eyes as well. So thanks for listening. Thanks, David, for contributing, and see you all soon.
Thanks a lot, Kim. It was really a pleasure, even though I did poorly on those rapid fire questions. So, but I believe I talked too much anyway. So
no, not at all.
So looking forward to the next time.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.